How's it going, everybody? This is going to be a very important video. It's important for me because it takes a lot of what I've learned through permaculture and just observing nature and what we have here on our property. There was a big revelation I had a few years ago when I was planting a lot of different things and doing a lot of different things, and it just happened to be a bad year. But nature was already doing the same thing that I was trying to do, but better. Basically, there was some different varieties of raspberries I was trying to plant. I planted a bunch of squash, some cherry trees. A couple things struggled that year, and I found all of those different things growing along the fence here. And so it's going to take us down a path here. There's 3 things that you can do to create wild permaculture. Now, what do I mean by wild permaculture? If you live on the eastern part of, if you live on this side of the Mississippi, if you live from the Mississippi over, this would really apply to you more than it would if you were in the desert, you know, if you were in a really dry part of the country. And the reason why is because there is already wild fruits and fruit trees and berry bushes and nuts growing here in the eastern part of the country. And right behind me right now, I'm standing by a bunch of wild blackberries. And these blackberries I didn't plant, and all I did was give them space to grow. I didn't mow here. And that brings us to the first way to create wild permaculture: no zones.
No zones.
Now you're probably asking, what are no zones? No zones are places where nothing happens, where you don't mow, you don't walk, you don't mess with, you just leave it alone. And it's hard for most people to do that. And a lot of people think that a lot of the really wild and weedy parts of my property are just because, but actually it's systematic. There's a lot of places that I've left alone, and it's for the birds to plant a bunch of stuff, and for me to plant a bunch of stuff, and for things to just grow naturally. I'm sure you guys have places, parks, where blackberries and raspberries and cherry trees and mulberry trees and persimmons and pawpaws and black walnuts, pecans, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And there's certain varieties of things that are very aggressive. You know, there are things that are aggressive, grow very vigorously, that are native to the United States. And then there's a lot of things that aren't native, and we'll get into that a little bit more in the third phase. So right now we're going to look at a no zone. Now, I had blackberries and raspberries growing along this fence line when we first moved here about 4 years ago, and all I've done is nothing.
Is nothing.
Nothing. It's a no zone. And if you look right here, do you see all this grass? I just stopped mowing around here. Let me take you guys with me. This is just years and years of not mowing this area. And because of not doing that, because of not doing things versus doing things, these are wild blackberries. And not only are there wild blackberries, but there's wild raspberries growing in here also too. You can see that. And we've been picking from these for the last couple years. And the grass is really thick in here, but they were already there. They were already there, and the reason that they were there is because that fence line is also a no zone. No one mows there. No one goes in there. So it kind of creates this area where things can just grow naturally if they find their way in there. Here's another example of a no zone. We're just in Appalachia in eastern Tennessee, and I stopped mowing this area right here. And the reason why is because I've got a mulberry growing right over here. But this thing right here is a black cherry, a wild black cherry that started growing on its own, and I left it, and it's pretty big. But look at this thing. But the best part about wild black cherries is not only do you get fruit from them, you can make syrup, but they're also medicinal. That's where most of the medicinal ingredient in your cough syrup comes from, is from the black cherry. Not only does it taste like black cherry soda, you make tea from it and all that stuff, but I also introduced into this no zone some wild black raspberries from the other side of the property, from the fence. So let me show that to you real quick. Here's a wild black raspberry that I put in here. I don't know if it was maybe a year or two ago, but it's already popped up in all different places. So I need to bury these little tips and they'll create new little black raspberries. And then I got a blueberry right here. So, black raspberry and a wild black cherry just growing in an area. You can see the grass in here, guys. It's thick. There's years and years and years of doing nothing. And here's the mulberry that I actually dug up and transplanted here, and it originally came from some wild permaculture I found growing near Chicago. Now there's two types of mulberries growing over here. There's this red purple mulberry that's got this really cool type of leaf that you can see on here. And then she's found out where all the good ones are. Look at all them hanging down there.
I want to squirt this mulberry.
You're gonna squirt the mulberry?
Yeah.
Now here's another cool thing. There's a white mulberry tree over here. Now this is got to be the one that the silkworms grow on or eat that produce silk. There it is right there. Now these are ripe. Even though they're white, they're ripe. And I mean they're falling off. Look at this. See that? They're just falling right off of there. Now the second way to create wild permaculture, guys, is to create artificial perches or fences. Because that's where I find most of this wild permaculture growing. Whether I'm in Tennessee, these black cherry trees are growing along a fence. You see the fence? South Carolina. I was driving. We went to pay some bills over here, our electric bill, and I seen a bunch of wild grapes growing all up and down in here. Now, these are called fox grapes. They're like a dark wild muscadine grape, and they are really sweet, really tasty. Illinois, Wisconsin. So right here we got a big elderberry bush, and there was a bunch of stuff in front of it, and I've tried to clear everything out, kind of make room. I mean, look at that. You can see it from right here. I just walked forward a little bit. But it is just loaded with mulberries, and they're going to be ripe here pretty soon. And you can't buy mulberries at the store, guys. They perish too quick. They don't ship well, so to speak. But look at that. Look at that nice dark one back there. If my camera will zoom. It does not matter the places that I've been to, even in Florida. Places that aren't disturbed, or there's places for birds to actually deposit seeds or other animals that's undisturbed, a no zone with a perch. You've got wild permaculture. You've got wild fruits and wild fruit trees and berry bushes that the birds eat, and every time they poop it out, they actually deposit these seeds to grow in a little nutrient dense seed packet that's going to grow. Now this right here is my grape trellis. This little fence line right here. I've got some wires on here, and I did this 2 years ago. Last summer, not this summer, but the summer before, I stopped mowing this area. I planted the grapes in the middle, I stopped mowing it, and it was grass. This year though, we were gone, and when I came back, there's tons and tons of wild blackberries. So the birds were perching on here over the last couple years, flying around over here in this part of the garden, depositing seeds down. Now, you can create fences or little perches, or you can actually take sticks and actually shove branches in the ground and make little spots for birds to sit. But check this out. Here's my grape trellis, and here's all the wild blackberries growing in here. These are all blackberry canes that are going to have fruit on them next year. And these things are 8 feet tall. There are more over here in this area, like right in here, and it kind of gets less as it goes down. They were obviously deposited here more than they were over there, but they'll eventually spread. And that's the nice part about it, is they'll actually spread eventually. Now, I don't know if it's too cold, if the leaves are gone or not, but I was going to try to find the grapes to show you. And, yeah. Here's the grapevines, little grapevine right there, growing up this little branch. So the grapes are good. And I created a no zone with a perch. So now I want to talk about the most important, I think probably the most important step. Step number 3 in creating wild permaculture. Introducing things. Introducing things that are very aggressive, very vigorous types of plants. And they have to be fruits, not just any type of thing. I'm not talking about kudzu that's going to take over, and even though you can eat kudzu, I'm still not, I mean, that's what everyone's going to talk about. This is the kudzu. I'm talking about fruiting berry bushes, trees, perennial things like that. Things that are going to create habitat. You know, understory trees, whether they're berry bushes, peaches, cherries, apricots, a lot of the prunus varieties, you know, like cherries and things like that, are very vigorous. You'll see little seedlings growing underneath them all the time. So introducing things like that spread easily on their own, but also that birds and squirrels can take those seeds and spread them in different directions. Alright, here's one of the no zones. I've put a bunch of wood chips here in the past, and I've just let it go. There's so much grass in here. But as you can see, there's a little peach seedling here. And all I did was take a peach pit, and I've done this in other places, and I don't see any popping up just yet, but here's one of them. And there's a peach seedling. Now here's a little cherry seedling that I was eating. It's either probably a cherry or a plum. And I put some plums and cherry seedlings all over here and peach seedlings. And I also put some in these little areas where I already had fruit trees, like this mulberry tree. I didn't know if this one was going to make it or not. So I put in a replacement. I put a bunch of peach pits and seedlings, and I just try to spread them all out. And this one right here it popped up. And so here's either a cherry seedling or a plum seedling. Now right here, these are actually wineberries. Now they're called wineberries, but they actually originated in Japan and China. Now these types of raspberries are also known as Japanese wild raspberries. And you can see the canes on here are totally different than the other canes that I've showed you previously in this video. They're red and they're fuzzy. And the first time I learned about these, I saw them growing in the mountains of North Carolina, in the woods. Just randomly in the woods, guys. This raspberry will grow. And I tasted it. We just happened to stumble on it when there was fruit on it, and they're delicious red. It was the best tasting raspberry I've ever had. And if they'll grow wild in the woods, what better thing to have in your garden that doesn't need special attention, special pruning, special care? You just give it areas to grow where you don't do anything to it. A no zone. You can see all this in here. An area for it to just spread on its own. And eventually I'll come in here and I'll kind of maybe give it a mow and put some wood chips in here and just let it go again on its own. But this right here, I dug up from a ditch. It's actually a ditch down the road from my house. I actually knocked on the neighbor's door and asked him if I could dig some of these up, and he said that's fine because he was planning on mowing it all anyways. And I got like maybe 30 or 40 plants of wineberries, and I've spread them out everywhere. Another thing that grows on its own, you can see right here, is a wild citrus tree. Might be hard to see it right now, This right here is actually a wild Japanese citrus. These are pawpaw trees, but right next to it, you see these? Poncirus trifoliata, Japanese wild citrus, guys. But this is awesome. I'm freaking out right now. Look at this. I wish I had a knife I could cut these open and show you guys. It's funny that I've got these Japanese varieties growing next to each other, but things from Japan are actually considered to be the most invasive over in the United States. Now these are fruits. This is a fruiting berry bush. This creates these really, I think they're really good, really seedy, small lemon-looking things. And I've done videos on those in the past. But you can see, and then once this grows, there'll be little seedlings all around here. This has the ability to spread on its own. So they're considered to be invasive, but they're very vigorous fruits and berries that aren't native to this area. Now, some things that I've introduced that are from this area that are very vigorous and can be so-called invasive, people call them invasive even though they're from here, are these wild black raspberries. Now, I dug these up also along the fence line, and I transplanted little canes with little roots all along this no zone right here. And I mulched it, and I've just let it go for the past year or two now, a couple years. And all along here, you can see are wild. Oh, they're catching me. You see that? There's black raspberries coming up over these. This here is an autumn olive. Now, an autumn olive is going to be a perfect example of what I'm talking about when introducing things that are wild and aggressive and not necessarily native to an area, but are very beneficial to permaculture. These roots of these berry bushes fix nitrogen, which means they pull nitrogen from the air and fix it into the ground and improve the soil over time. So as these things spread and birds deposit them and you deposit them, they actually make your soil better. They can make it more nitrogen rich. Now, look how tall this thing is. This thing here is probably 10 feet. Now, like I was just showing you before, this spot behind me that's got the wild black cherry tree, I introduced a lot of different things to this area. I introduced wild black raspberry from over there. So now this is going to spread, that black raspberry is going to spread up and down here, up and down this no zone, because no one's cutting it, no one's mowing it, and birds can deposit seeds there, and then that plant can spread on its own. The mulberry tree came from some mulberries that were growing wild along a fence outside of Chicago, and these were some delicious mulberry trees. I've got a lot of seedlings that I dug up there and brought here with me, and that's one of them. Now, I wish it's stupid not to be doing it, you know, in the summertime, but I'm here showing it to you guys now. And there's a black cherry that the birds brought here. So all I'm doing is simulating what nature already does. And what I mean by nature, I mean birds, squirrels, all the little animals of the forest. You know, people look at a forest. I'm going to show you the forest as I talk about this to kind of give you guys an idea. Right over there is the forest. Those are trees. And that forest, it's been impacted by humans. You know, obviously that's not a natural environment right there. You know, just because there's trees and nature there does not mean that's naturally how things are. That's been already logged multiple times since humans have been here. So we've already changed the natural environment. We've already changed the natural landscape. The large, couple 100-year-old hardwood trees are no longer there, and what you're looking at is regrowth. Now that regrowth was planted in part also along with animals. There's oak trees that were planted by squirrels. There's large native mulberry trees and native cherry trees and maple trees and lots of things that were created by animals. Now, if we could do the same thing that those animals do to create human habitat that supports human life. Let me give you an idea. I'm hopping around a lot, but hey, let me give you an idea. If you were going to create an environment, a habitat for a gorilla, for a chimpanzee, you were the head zookeeper and you were creating new exhibits, Not saying that you would, but let's just, theoretically, you would create a habitat that would support the gorilla. You'd put bamboo there and all the different plants and trees and things that a gorilla would need. But yet when people buy property, the first thing they do is go in and cut everything down and put a house and some ornamental decorative trees in their driveway and all that other stuff. But why not create habitat for humans? And that's what a lot about permaculture and creating food forests is all about, is creating these permanent food systems that live past us and can feed you and feed the next generation and provide income. And it's a way of reinserting humans back into the natural environment. So, with all of that said, introduce things that grow very aggressively to make up for what humans have done, for changing the natural environment, for creating all of this regrowth and mowing these fields, these pasture, these so-called hay fields, these hay farmers, with very aggressive fruits, aggressive growing, vigorous things that grow. All you got to do is introduce a few things, maybe a few seeds in the ground, and then it'll spread and create food for generations. You're creating habitat that supports people. Blackberries and raspberries and cherries and peaches and, even apples and, pecan trees and walnut trees and all those different things. Alright guys, so these are the 3 ways to create wild permaculture on your property that I just showed you. First way, create a no zone. Just don't do anything. Stop mowing, stop doing anything, and animals will start depositing seeds there. You'd be surprised what will start growing there. There's so many different types of native fruits and berries and blackberries and raspberries and gooseberries and blueberries and cherries and native things that the animals actually already eat and will deposit there, where you don't have to do anything. You don't have to plant anything. Trust me. You can walk around your neighborhood, find ditches and areas that are overgrown, and you'll find fruits. I take my word on it. I guarantee you 100%. If you live anywhere east of the Mississippi River, you can walk anywhere in the ditch or an area that's overgrown, even an old property that's overgrown, and you can actually find fruits and berries and nuts and all those different things just growing wild there. And then maybe dig some up and take some home with you and put them in your no zone. So number 2 is creating artificial fences and perches, like a little perch for birds to sit on and deposit those seeds into your no zones. Whether they are, posts, you actually dig wooden posts and put wooden posts in, or a fence just like right behind me, where birds will take small seeds and small fruits and berries and nuts and will start growing there. Now, just like behind me, this beautiful tree right here, people plant as a decoration, as an ornamental. So this is where it can go wrong, when people plant things that the birds eat and actually you really can't eat. It's a type of pear. It's a Bradford pear. It's a beautiful Bradford pear. But the fruits are the size of peas, and the birds will deposit these along fence lines. And they're great. They flower and they look beautiful, and they actually help pollinate your other pear trees. But wouldn't it be nicer to have something here instead of this Bradford pear? And right behind me is a black cherry. What I'm grabbing right here, this branch right here, is a black cherry right next to this Bradford pear. So the birds not only deposited this pear tree, but also a cherry tree, a pear and a cherry, along this fence line. And I didn't do anything. Someone put a fence up here as a property divide, and it's growing along here. And there's also raspberries and blackberries. These are blackberries right here. And this is all a no zone with a perch. Number 3, help introduce things that will spread on their own, by you, and also by birds and other animals. This is probably the most important thing. Now, if you introduce things that grow very vigorously, like I've said, that are very aggressive, and some people call them invasive, they will spread and create their own permaculture, and they will occupy your no zones and where you have perches. So if you plant things like autumn olive, which is a delicious berry that fruits in the fall when not a lot of other things fruit, and I have a bunch around here, and I've actually dug these things up from places and that were just growing wild, you know, it's becoming, you know, a bunch of autumn olive everywhere because there's nothing else growing there other than power lines and next to roadside ditches. So they've occupied these areas that were transformed by people. You know, autumn olive was planted along ditches in Michigan whenever they'd put a road in, because it helped hold the soil back and it fixed nitrogen. Not only it produces a delicious fruit, a red berry that you can eat, and the birds spread them and everything like that. So I've introduced those to this property, and that's just one thing. I'll actually put a list right here of all the different things, if you're in this area, if you're actually east of the Mississippi, that will actually spread and grow. And all you have to do is introduce it, and the animals will spread it. When you eat the seeds and stuff, spit them out into your no zones where the grass is really tall, and you'd be surprised within a year or two you'll have seedlings this tall. You know, I've done that with peaches. I've got peaches all over the place. You know, peach seedlings that are just growing where I put a peach pit that I was eating, and I put it in the ground, and it's growing there now. So just like the animals deposit seeds, I'm depositing seeds and introducing things. So you can actually take some of these black cherry seedlings, spread them out, put them in areas, and create new no zones and create more wild permaculture. So thanks for watching this, guys. I hope this helped you guys out. I hope I could share some of the things that I'm doing and I'm learning that nature's already doing. Just observing what nature's doing, and by not doing things. You know, a lot of things are about doing this or doing that. If you just sit back and see what things are already going on, you'd be surprised what you can find. You know, I love foraging and finding fruits and berries in the woods and along creeks and ditches and roadsides and stuff. And you know, when I'm planting things at home, and I've still got a couple years till things fruit, and already nature is already doing these things. So it's a way of working with nature instead of against it, giving nature the space and the opportunity to show you what it can do with blackberries and raspberries and these beautiful Bradford pears that look beautiful in the spring with flowers, and then in the fall, but you know, the birds ate them and spread them along these fence lines. So thanks for watching. Y'all take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Wild onion, wild. It's just growing wild, and some wild. But here's the wild garlic. Wild. It's just it's a wild food forest. You know, someone has planted a bunch of things, and it's just taken over.